Hey, this is Khan, you're watching Ninja Pulls, and update 43 is on its way. Bigger than we expected, and some of the most exciting changes are actually coming to Infinite Archive, ESO's roguelite endless dungeon mode. New maps, new enemies with new mechanics, new power-ups, new bosses, and new rewards, including 7 new class sets. It's a long list and a solid upgrade, but the most important thing not on the list is that they're making it more fun to play. That's the main thing I've noticed on PTS and the main thing I want to get across in this video. Let me give you an example. One new verse, Reflected Ruin, gives you this bubble while blocking, storing up damage. When you bash, you release the damage in this sonic boom and crazy green explosion. Watching someone else do it doesn't really do it justice. It's like blowing up something big in a shooter. There's a simple, old school kind of delight here that fantasy MMOs aren't exactly known for. It's a smart bit of design, and that sense of cranking up the fun is typical of these new updates. Fans of Infinite Archive, who already have all the collectibles and achievements, are going to be happy. But ZOS are clearly thinking of the players who don't go there as often, or who never go past Arcs 1 or 2. They're reaching out to those players with new toys and mechanisms which persuade them to stay a little longer. And it might just work. So let's go through the changes and what effect they actually have on gameplay and enjoyment. Start with the new maps. Now, if you've been to the Infinite Archive, you'll know the whole place is fucking bananas. The environments look like an acid-fueled painting from a 70s prog album cover. But apart from things you can fall off or some nooks and crannies for line of sight stacking, it's mostly window dressing. Whether you spawn into this map or that map doesn't really make a difference. That is changing. Not only are the new maps even more visually extreme, there's also freezing water and molten rain that damages you. Not new ideas, but a fun addition. It's not a huge threat. The main thing in the ice areas is figuring out how to stack enemies in a safe spot or use the edge of the map to line of sight them. The fire areas are different. The molten rain AoEs follow you around, so you can either sidestep them as they land, kite the whole thing and break your stack, or just ignore it and get hit. On higher arcs, when every wave is a fight for survival, this adds a little extra pressure, but on their own, the freezing water and molten rain aren't going to stress out more casual players. It just adds extra spice to the encounters. Again, I'm trying to see it from the dev's perspective, and that's gotta be the goal here. We've built the system, tweaked the values, and everything works, so now let's throw some fireworks, whoopee cushions, and custard pies in there. That's kind of what it feels like. That's not to say it's all fluff. Accessibility seems also to have been a major goal. Early arcs are going to become easier thanks to some new verses and visions, and especially the new daily quest. Once the patch goes live, you can pick this up from a new NPC called Esalinwe, loitering here in the index. She's basically an ESO player that went into the archive, got clapped, and is butthurt about it. To get revenge, she wants you to kill 1 marauder or 10 fabled. It's a funny premise, but the reward is a mystery verse, a bit like those we already get in the archive, but this one is for a random transformation verse, instantly turning you into the Ice Avatar, the Iron Atronach, the Werewolf Behemoth, or the brand new Undead Avatar, whether or not you have the visions collected. Normally, to use these, you need to find and collect all 3 visions during one run, before the verse even has a chance to drop. That can take quite a few arcs, unless you get lucky early, so some of the strongest and most entertaining power-ups aren't even seen by a whole load of players. This new daily fixes that. Anyone can complete it and have a mystery transformation sitting in their quick slot for the right moment. It's single use only, and you can only use 1 per run, but it's great to have if things get dicey. When Gothmau shows up, for example. And again, it's aimed primarily at the more chill players who don't see transformation verses that often. Another thing that's kinda shrewd here, you have to go into Arc 2 to complete the daily, since you only get 4 fabled and 0 marauders in the first arc. So we're being encouraged just to push a bit further and being rewarded with a super strong power-up that'll make our next visit even easier. Speaking of transformations, that new Undead Avatar is pretty cool. It's essentially a Lich Poly with built-in boosts to mitigation and damage. The latter increases by 5% for every enemy you kill, and considering you can easily get 15 in a single stage, that's quite a bit. Also, you can summon 5 skeletons at a time to come and fight for you. They don't deal massive damage, especially on a tank spec, but they soak up aggro, throw down flame AoEs, and fear small adds. Plus, their damage should be buffed by well-trained command, which stacks, and will eventually make them a lot stronger. You can have a maximum of 10 following you at any time, your very own army of darkness. Obviously, Necro enjoyers are going to be the most excited about this new toy, but it's fun and useful to anyone. The 3 visions required to use the Undead Avatarverse aren't quite as exciting to look at on their own, but they're not exactly weak either. Necrotic Fortification reduces your magic damage taken, Necrotic Strikes boosts your magic damage done, and Necrotic Support restores resources for every enemy you kill. What about the other new visions? Adaptive Athlete, Adaptive Conqueror, and Adaptive Defender grant scaling bonuses based on your current resources. Athlete accelerates your mag and stam recovery based on how much you're missing, and Defender reduces damage taken based on your missing health. These visions stack as you'd expect, and the limit rises based on how many of them you've got. Adaptive Conqueror boosts your damage depending on how much ultimate you currently have, and makes your ult more expensive, incentivizing you to hang on to it. Initially, it's not that great, 1% for every 100 ult you have, but again, it stacks, and although I didn't test this yet, it looks like if you have 5 stacks and are sitting on 500 ult, that should be a 30% damage increase, unless I missed something. Apocryphal Emissary summons this permanent pet to fight with you. Again, the damage isn't great, but again, it should be buffed by well-trained command, which is a vision most players have just been ignoring up to now because it's irrelevant much of the time. It's probably no coincidence that we're getting this permanent pet and a pet-based transformation to make well-trained command a bit more useful. The pet also distracts at least one enemy from attacking you, which takes a bit of pressure off. It can be killed by being knocked off the platform, for example, but it will spawn right back and carry on. And more importantly, the pet gives you permanent minor protection, and then minor resolve and minor toughness as you stack it up. Necrotic Fortification, Strikes, and Support we already covered. Prickly Retort is a pretty beefy reflected damage effect, which seems to have no cooldown. Anything dealing direct damage to you within range is gonna get clapped back pretty hard. This does seem to scale with your offensive stats, so tanks won't deal as much damage with it even though they should be the ones taking most of the direct hits. Solo players, on the other hand, should get some chunky free damage out of this once it's stacked up a few times. And remember, it's a vision, so it's permanent. Quickened Tinctures reduces your potion cooldowns. Storm Projection buffs your shock damage and adds a lightning bolt to your direct damage attacks, arcing between enemies. There is a cooldown, but Sorks are obviously going to enjoy this one. That's it for the visions. They seem to be designed to round out the existing range of visions, plug some of the gaps, and again, make the player experience in the archive feel a bit more fun and forgiving. But I think the real fun and games are in the new verses. There are 8 of these. Extravagant Elixirs turns you into a Brewmaster from Dreadsail Reef, and when you take a potion, you shrink nearby enemies and create more shrinking AoEs all around you. The comedy value here is obvious, especially when you use it on a really big enemy, but it also reduces their damage done and increases their damage taken by 25%. Not bad, so if your teammate has this verse ready, get them to use it for a burst phase. Grasping Limbs looks cool as hell, but is one of the more underwhelming ones for me. The snare feels kinda random and hard to predict, but if you're solo and kiting a lot of dangerous adds in higher arcs, I can see a free CC like this being very handy. But I'd much rather have Orbiting Echoes. Alright, I predict this will be a fan favourite. It spawns a giant mystic orb that orbits you slowly at a distance and absolutely shreds anything it touches. It does have a trade-off in that it's difficult to do your usual full damage routine and have this thing constantly hitting the target. But every time it deals damage, it summons another orb, 3 maximum, so you can sort of twist and reposition yourself so something's always in contact. So yeah, it looks pretty good for damage, but actually I think the reason players will like it is because it's fun to play that minigame and watch it melt stuff, especially on lower arcs. Phalanx is another fun one, kind of a supercharged defensive verse. It spawns a wall of these guys in front of you, and they bash and stagger any enemy that comes close and isn't immune. The bashes don't do much damage, but hey, it's free, and you also get a fat replenishing shield while you hide behind them. Reflected Ruin we already talked about at the start, the bubble which stores up damage and explodes when you bash. Like I said, Maya and I were really sold on this verse, it's just so satisfying to use. You do need to store 5k in blocked damage before the big explosion is available, and there isn't an obvious tell when it's ready, at least I didn't see it until I was playing back these clips. But the character inside the bubble will get a green glow around their torso when the big bash is ready. It wasn't super obvious to me, so I thought I'd share that here and hopefully save you guys some time figuring it out. Tempest is another very dramatic verse. You summon this guy and he deals constant shock damage in a 25-meter radius around him. The upfront hit when he arrives is also pretty big, so don't summon him too early. Temporal speed makes you fast, which is more useful than it might sound at first. You also drop these AoEs on the ground which snare enemies and make you move even faster. If you're stacking and burning mobs, this isn't so useful, but if you're playing a bit of defense and need to stay ahead of your enemies, it could be very handy. Undead Avatar, we already talked about. Those are all the new visions and verses. They don't somehow transform Infinite Archive into a radically new experience, but they do add extra depth and some more giggles to the whole thing. What about all the new monsters? Well, there aren't any new factions of basic enemies. In case you didn't know, you get 2 random factions per stage. That's how the game generates a pool of monsters to populate the encounter. So no new factions as far as we could tell, but we're getting hags, ghosts, magma frogs, winged twilight, although my brain insists they were already in here, and a type of undead Argonian called Grovebound from the Murkmire DLC. You can also meet new elite enemies, including a bear that looks like Archdruid Devirik, a lich with some nasty AoEs, and a wraith of crows that swoops around the battlefield. These are the ones that typically show up in wave 3 of a stage and have special attacks, like the boar, the lurcher, the minotaur, etc. There are 4 new fabled as far as we could tell. In case you don't know, fabled are special elite enemies which are usually a priority kill. They all wear the Scribes of Mora style and often spawn in a little later and away from the other ads. They also have long range and cannot be pulled. So they're a pain in the ass basically. The Infuser and Spell Thief are already infamous for their ability to ruin everything very quickly on higher arcs. And I think it's fair to say that Mike Finnegan and the Encounter team want to give us more of that. Thanks Finn, you're a peach. Brewmasters are familiar from Dreadsail Reef. They drop potion AoEs that shrink you and which can be incredibly dangerous because the animation drops your block for a few moments. These ones also throw potions that create a dome, protecting them and other enemies, and if they survive long enough they also drink a potion which heals them and other nearby enemies. They're kinda like the Totem Masters in that sense. If you've ever imagined how annoying it would be if monsters had healers too, well here you go. Again, it's a feature that won't frustrate newcomers, but becomes more meaningful on higher arcs. The dome doesn't last forever, but we were pulling the Brewmaster out of it and killing it as quickly as possible. Lightbringers are new to the game in Gold Road. They're from Lucent Citadel, those guys that drop the golden AoEs when they're killed. The Archive version throws one of these on a random enemy, and anything inside it becomes immune to damage until you drag them out or wait for the AoE to expire. They also drop one on their position when they die, and both AoEs hit hard, so take care. Finally, they also throw Sunburst on you, again familiar from the trial. The AoE grows, then pops, and then continues to send out these smaller AoEs in all directions. If you're with a buddy, don't drop it on top of them. Mystics were apparently data mined in the original release of Infinite Archive, but they didn't appear until this patch. They throw meteors like those in Rockgrove, which should be killed before they can explode. The meteors don't take long to kill, but they can drop behind you or far away, which can be a pain. They definitely don't always one-shot you. We couldn't figure out exactly what the damage was based on, but in this clip it takes about 60% of my health every time. Either way, it's best to focus the meteors, then finish the Mystic as quick as you can. Stormcallers are probably the least scary of the new fabled. They are still dangerous, dropping a big shock AoE and forcing you to reposition. They also have a Flame Shaper move where they deal continuous shock damage until you interrupt them. The patch notes say there are 10 new cycle bosses, but we only spotted 8 new ones, despite spending dozens of hours in there and killing countless bosses until we'd seen most of these new ones at least twice. So 2 are unconfirmed, at least by us, but honestly these won't generally have a huge impact on gameplay. It's mostly just cool to have more variety and to see familiar or dreaded foes showing up on the other side of that portal. The new ones we saw are Dugon the Red, the Orc Chief world boss from Malaval Tor, Dranos Velador, the hippity-hoppity 4th boss from Cradle of Shadows, Graufang, the bear world boss from Glenumbra, Kovan Girion, the hyperactive teleporting first boss from Balsanar, Sail Ripper, that giant harpy side boss from Dreadsail Reef, Stada, the Golden Saint world boss from Alikir Desert, Valariel, the Wistmother penultimate boss from Etherean Archive, and Varzanon, the Bone Colossus second boss from Graven Deep. I think the only one of these that stuck out to me as something that might be tricky or annoying on higher arcs was Dranos Velador. Since he deals a lot of AoE damage, he hops around a lot, and he has those immunity phases. Finally, the two new marauders, Bitog the werewolf behemoth and Zulfimbul the minotaur. We fought them both several times, but again, we were trying to sprint through to see as many bosses as possible, so whenever we got past Arc 4 or 5 and began to slow down, we would just reset. So we never tackled these new fellas on a particularly high level of difficulty, and neither of them seemed quite as nasty as Gothmau, which is a relief, but still they felt like pretty serious opponents, especially Bitog the werewolf. You know he's coming because the entire arena turns dark, like the Balorg hunt phase in March of Sacrifices. At first we started looking for a turquoise glow to trap him, but that doesn't seem to be the deal here. You just lose a lot of visibility until he's gone. You can still see him and all the other enemies coming through the dark because they get red glowing eyes, which is creepy as hell, and of course if you have health bars or nameplates active. Still, it's a little unnerving. This guy doesn't have any other mechanics, he just mauls you or your tank with constant attacks, a charged up double swipe and a bleed over time. He looks super cool and threatening, and I look forward to running into him when I have the werewolf transformation active. That'll be a fun showdown. The Minotaur Zulfimbul's Book of Tricks is more about movement and AoE damage. His heavy attack is pretty grim, the kind of thing you might want to dodge rather than block depending on your build, but he also keeps dropping big AoEs on the ground, forcing you to move, while his charge attack knocks you back and deals flame damage. He's a little like the Atronach that Thoat spawns at the end of Arc 2. You kind of have to chase him, burst him, and be prepared to move again when the AoEs appear. He also buffs himself with a shield now and then. We tried moving him in and out of the AoEs to see what would happen, but it didn't seem to make any difference. Anyway, this isn't a full guide to archive mechanics, just a description of what's coming with the new update. Couple more things before we finish. One is the new collectible upgrade, which lets you summon a malographic watcher. It's not clear what this is, whether it's a regular watcher Daedra or one of those eyeballs with the laser beam, as the icon suggests, but either way, it's a permanent upgrade that you buy from Ool in the Index, but it's locked behind an achievement which takes 30 days to complete. So nobody knows what this does yet, and by the time we'd unlock it on PTS, the update will be live anyway, so I guess it'll be a nice surprise. Whether it's another permanent pet, a powerful summon with a long cooldown, or a summon that can spawn randomly in any room, get on those daily quests once Update 43 goes live so you can unlock it nice and early. The other thing is, of course, the new class sets. Here's a reminder of their tooltips and what they do. So much has been said about these already, so let's not go over it all here again, but they do look a bit more interesting than the first round. I know Infinite Archive isn't everyone's favourite thing in ESO. Personally, I love dungeons. I would have been very happy to continue getting 4 of those instead of 2 each year. But I was pleasantly surprised at how well the archive works and fits within the game. It's already arguably the best use of your time in terms of collectibles, achievements, gear, furnishings, gold. The XP isn't bad either, and it's great practice. And with these updates, they're really piling on the incentives for us. More fun, greater accessibility, and more rewards. I'm definitely heading back in when Update 43 launches. I hope you will too, and I hope this has helped prepare you for what you'll find in there. Please remember to support Ninja Paws if you appreciate what we do. Check out the website, join the Discord, and of course, watch all of our stuff on YouTube and Twitch. I think we're getting better and better at this, and all your support is massively appreciated. Take care guys, and thanks for watching.